Right. So we have got stuff on the screen. Let me just. Now this is when you see this is the way economics had to be looked upon. At least that's how I see it. You look at the economy. The third column is the output or the outcomes. I have to say. What do we want? We want economic growth. If Mr. Maitripala Sirisena hears from Dr. Indrajith Swami saying that, look, 2017 economic growth is going to be 8%. Mr. Maitripala Sirisena, with all the difficulties they have in the political arena, he's going to go for elections. Because that's one of the fundamental parameters that's going to decide, because that level of economic growth, 8% economic growth, it's going to translate into a lot of cash into people's pockets, and that people are going to be very happy. That's one reason why Mr. Mahinda Rajapaksa's regime, still, despite all the other issues they had, making inroads. One reason is during his time he was able to keep the economic growth on a high plateau. Then reduce unemployment. If there is unemployment, JVP and LTT and all those guys are going to make a comeback, definitely, serious comeback. Higher standard of living, this is something everybody wants to have. Then greater social welfare. We know that the kind of welfare we have. We go to a hospital, dengue, for example, why it has become such a huge issue is because we don't have the kind of social welfare, that social infrastructure that could take care of these kind of serious issues. Then economic strength. Now, if we have a good economic strength, we can tell China, look, this is the way we do it. We tell India, look, these are our terms, take it or leave it. So if you have economic strength, you basically speak out and with a lot of confidence. And when you don't have economic strength, you go behind and say, okay man, give us some help. That's what happened to this government. You tell the guys, get out, and then you realize, oh my goodness, no cash, run back and say, look, we made a mistake, please come back. So that's how the Chinese have come back again. And the political stability. So at the end of the day, the political stability is the one that keeps. So coming to that issue, you start from how an economy really develops itself from kind of very primitive economy like you find in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa. They are very primitive scenarios into something which is dynamic, and then something that delivers. South Korea, for example. We remember 1960s, we used to say, look, Korea. Now, but we are saying Korea, again, you don't talk about something good and nice and well placed, but you're talking about something really messy, very bad, poor quality. But you don't say that anymore. And on the other hand, Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew, some 20, 30 years ago, was looking at Colombo and say, look, I want to make Colombo Singapore. But things have changed so much. Now we are looking up to Singapore as the model. Anyway, that is because we have not managed this equation well. We have not done the right thing. So basically, in the case of economics, you need what we call productive capital. A capital that can produce, that can translate. We kind of have a lot of capital, but not very productive. We don't have, Japan, for example, doesn't have a lot of capital at the beginning. They didn't have the resources, but they turn things out. South Korea, if you take the Korean peninsula, you had North Korea and South Korea. North Korea got all the valuable resources in the peninsula. South Korea got very basic. But what happened was, you created a kind of capital that really moved the whole economy and the people's living standards. Then some financial system. We inherited one of the best financial systems in South Asia. We were very sophisticated, and the plantation economy came. I'm not saying plantation economy was our bread and butter or anything, but then at that time we had an economy that was really going very well from very economic terms. It doesn't mean it was very good for people. People were extremely poor. So that was one of the fundamental forces in that economy. It was rich, very powerful, had all institutions that one requires to have, but it was not owned by people. The benefits were not trickling down to people. So people were very, very poor. So that doesn't sustain, and that cannot be sustained. So you got to look at it. Then you have a financial infrastructure. We had a war, 30 years of war, that really did not give us any opportunity of creating infrastructure. Now we know, today when I was coming, I had to go back, I come from Panadura, I had to go back to Panadura, drop someone and come back. I took the highway. It was, rather than coming down the Gold Road, I took the highway and took a bit of a longer term, but then it saved a lot of time and saved a lot of stress in driving. So infrastructure does make a big difference. Disciplined workforce, you know how much we have a discipline. I don't blame the people or the workforce, but then workforce has to be disciplined. These are some of the critical elements that in developed countries, the countries that have developed very rapidly. Appropriate policies and strategies. This is where we make a hell of a mess. We just don't know what policies, what strategies we got to have. That's why we sell Hambantota Port. When Hambantota Port is supposed to be a strategic asset, that should have been preserved, and around that you should have created a lot of other capital. Then visionary political leadership. Unfortunately or fortunately, we have one of the highest literacy rates in South Asia, and we are competing with the middle income countries, but we just don't seem to be producing the right guys to the right place. So anyway, there's some anomaly somewhere here. So coming to but having said that, then you come to how countries have mobilized themselves into much higher is that you mobilization of financial capital. Now, banks having cash does not mean anything. People having cash does not mean anything. So you got to put that into a circulating, so that people who want cash can get it cheap, and the people who are having extra cash have a return. So you need to have sound financial systems which are developing as you go along. Growth in capital stock, which we call investment. Unless you have right level of investment, you just can't get things moving. Then growth in productivity. Productivity is very often, in the modern context, matters a lot, because everybody is trying to produce cheap and trying to produce better. So as a result, productivity has become extremely important. I'll come back to that in a minute later on. Learning by doing. As we started garment industries, we were doing very tailoring, but now we have moved up the ladder into something of a different kind. So we are now more creative, more innovative in the industry. So everybody has done that. China, for example, just assembling things, but not anymore. They do assemble yet, but at the same time, they are onto very high level of production. I was talking to someone yesterday. He was telling me about, he's a batchmate of mine, he came from the US. He was talking about how China has bought one of those famous tractor manufacturing plants in France. When the plant was to be closed down, Chinese came, bought it over. So they reestablished. The people were very happy as well. But what is more fundamental was they took the technology. They took the technology back to China and started tractor making for the rest of the world. So this is the way countries move on. More savings for investment. This is where we have a serious problem. We don't have enough savings. As a result, we have to go around with the begging bowl. Growth in human capital. Unfortunately or fortunately, we have a fair amount of human capital in place, but what is not happening is that this human capital is not put into a proper productive workforce. So this is the kind of scenario we were talking about. Now, okay, I'm not trying to give you the specifics of economics, I'm trying to give you a story. Then you come to more specific aspects. This is like the dashboard on the car, or this is like the cockpit in an airplane. You have different elements that tell you what is happening. You have financial system that is like the lubricant system that really moves things around in the system. and also the circuits. Then the capital stock, the engine and everything that drives the plane and economy as well. The labor, the pilot, the human capital that is coming along. Now, when you are driving the plane, you are looking at first and foremost the speed, the motive force. If there is no motive force, plane will be grounded. But as you are going, you'll be looking at the elevations, you're looking at the wind speed, you're looking at the engine temperature, you're looking at the engine pressure. Now that's the sort of stuff you come across in an economy as well. One, inflation. The heat, how much heat it generates. In a car you have thermometer, heat meter. So it tells you, look, this is, so you try to have it maintained. Then the BOP status, how much you interact with inside and outside. So BOP, balance of payment as we call it. We'll come to these things detailed. The demand stability. There are a lot of things that are required. In a plane, of course, it's fairly straightforward, but in economy, the demand stability is talking about. There are people, let's say, you are trying to create some project and it requires a lot of foreign exchange, which you don't have. So that means you create a lot of demand in the foreign exchange market for dollars. You want to buy some big equipment, you need a lot of dollars, so demand. Then the famous central bank fiasco, the bonds. That's also a demand scenario. Why? Because government decides we're going to have 1 billion treasury bills or bonds, and that's just the decision. In the morning, within a matter of hours, you decide, no, let's make it 10 billion. Now that is totally dislocating the balance. Imagine at home, you tell your wife tells you, look, there's these people coming home. It happened to me, just a week ago. Some friends came over, so my wife said, I think give me about 5,000 rupees just to keep it. Then by about 10 o'clock, I get a call saying, I think make it about 20,000. I said, where the hell I get money from? But then in a domestic scenario as well, these things can upset the whole balance. So demand stability is extremely important. Fiscal measures. Fiscal measures is that in a household, the amount of money you have, the amount of expenditure you have, the overall scenario. And if you don't have enough money, what do? Use the credit card. If I don't have money, my wife will say, look, you have a credit card, use it. Now that is fiscal. Why? Because you're borrowing. And that means next month I have a serious problem of paying the darn cash. Then public debt. Now that's what happens at the end of the day. You sit down and say, oh my goodness, I had to pay to the SMIB, I had to pay to the credit card, I had to pay to the loan, I had to pay la. You have a whole list of debt. So these are for a country as well. But with all that, what you are effectively trying to do is you're trying to bring a better living standards at the household as well. So you're trying to translate in a country scenario from where you create the engine and growth, and it will make everybody happy, it will have a fair distribution of resources, it will allow people to realize their dreams and all that. So the last one, closing income gaps. Now it's becoming extremely important. There was a time where people ignored it completely. It said, income gaps are not so important. Let's make somebody rich. And then the rich will spend money, and so that the poor will eventually get it. I remember Mr. R. Premadasa, the president, when he was talking about taking garment factories to villages, he used this word. I take big investments to villages. So the villages will have investors coming there. So the village women will now start working there. So they will start. They used to have no slippers. Now they have slippers. They will want slippers. They want to change their clothes. So that means there's a certain amount of income trickling down to people out of the. But now that situation has changed dramatically. Now people demand, even before you start, well, I want that, I want my free education, I want my whatever. So everything. So it's that we call welfare state. So we are more towards distribution. We are not being into economic growth. Okay. Now this is Sri Lankan scenario. I'll quickly run down the scenario. Until about 1930s, during Suddha's time, we had what we call laissez-faire. Laissez-faire means everything is market-driven. Government does not get involved in anything. It just lets everything to be decided by the market. We call laissez-faire. So state was very little. It collected taxes. It was focusing on infrastructure. Government will basically build up the roads, train services. Even the banks were not government. It was all run by private. So all economic activities are run by private. Some supporting activities were done by. But then the problem that we had there was it was very rich, super rich economy. In fact, one of the richest in South Asia, and but it had equally bad poverty all across the society. So it was not a people's economy. In 1931, we had the first welfare state. First welfare state means the Dynamo Constitution decided people must be given franchise, so universal franchise, voting, right to vote. So for some strange reason, it happened under the colonial. But interesting, our guys, the guys who were with the colonial masters, did not want to see that happen. They said, don't give, it's going to make a mess of the whole thing. But the Suddhas nevertheless gave it. And with that they gave some welfare like health, limited health and education. That was the beginning of that was the first transformation in the Sri Lankan economy. Then come to 1931 to 47, so it was limited self-rule, but nothing much, but then there was some recognition for income distribution. Then 1947 to 56, the same scenario, Sri Lankan government in power, they continued economically, we call market economy. They didn't interfere. But there was small interferences trying to bring in some of the people into the whole economic scenario through agriculture. So there were some limited agriculture, but there was nothing else. But we never had serious problems. Why we never had serious problems? Our tea was doing very well. So of course, it was on a decline, but nevertheless we still had fair amount of tea. But by time 50s, we have exhausted all the resources. We just don't have anything. So we were at a point of bankruptcy. So at that time, the change of government. Then comes what we call import substitution. Import substitution means let's make things ourselves. Gandhian policy. So this India and a lot of South Asian countries all adopted this policy. This was a widespread policy. Now presently we are trying to push into something else, what we call export policy. Right? Export is different. Export is you are producing to sell to the neighbor. You are producing to sell to the rest of the world. Import substitution is let's do it ourselves. Let's make it ourselves. So that means you are saving for an exchange. So, but now what happens is most of the countries, it's a combination of the two. You have import substitution and you have export. Some guys have really pushed for exports. China, for example, South Korea, for example, all East Asian countries, they emphasized more on exports while keeping certain amount of import substitution. Import substitution we call ISI versus EOI. EOI is export oriented industrialization. ISI is import substitution industrialization. So but in 1965 to 70 there was a fair amount of nationalization. So all the private assets were nationalized, buses were nationalized, petroleum was nationalized, a lot of other things. Now, one of the problems we had at that time was we never had industries. So 1965 to 70s, then again 70 to 77, 1956 to 64, the government was a socialistic government. So I mean, they were more on the welfare state rather than on the economic growth. So as a result, but they did something right. What they did right was, the entire economy was depending on tea. Anything happens to tea, the whole system collapses, and it was already collapsing. Second, we anyway wanted a lot of things imported, so they thought the best way to do is, okay, we want something alternative to tea industry. Second, we are importing a lot of things which we need because people need houses, people need steel, let's make it ourselves. So, but how do we get the technology? Socialist countries offered factories. That's how it came about. 1970 to 77 was 65 to 70 was again a little reversal, Dudley Senanayake regime. Then 70 to 77 was everything again on a full throttle for welfare economy, nationalization, but tried to promote some domestic industries. Gem industry, for example, was innovation in that. State National Savings Bank was an innovation in that. So it had happened, but then there was a serious problem. 1973, OPEC oil crisis. What happened was, OPEC decided, let's work together and make one single exporter of oil. So what did that mean? That means let's stop everybody competing with each other. Let's have a decided quota system. That means world is going to be short of oil. And when something is short of something, the prices go up. So that's exactly what happened. It was a shock, and it really affected all the countries which are import dependent, and Sri Lanka was one of the first in the list. We were small, we never had any alternatives, so there were a lot of restrictions. I remember when we were small kids, we had to, we go to Kandy, my uncles were in Kandy, so we have suitcases full of rice tucked inside saris, and so it was a very bad time. But 1977 comes J.R. Jayawardena. He said, Yankee Dicky, people call him. But why he is called? Because he is pro-West. He said, look, this is all rubbish. Let's do something what the Asians did. So he started doing something different. So he said, export-oriented industry. So first time Sri Lanka tried to embark on something other successful countries have done. But there was a serious problem as well, because he was highly capitalistic and highly we call it neoliberal economy. It means his main focus was private sector and a private sector economic. And then as a result, people were used to a certain kind of welfare. There was a collision. That collision was first manifested by 1981 strike. People asked him. So what he did was, he sacked the whole government people and said, look, I don't want you guys. But that was a fundamental mistake in our whole economic history, because all Asian countries, what they did was they transformed the public sector into something that was very efficient, that was in line with the economic scenario. Now what we have now is we have a totally opposite development in the public sector. So it is difficult to bring it back. So this is the clash we have at the moment as well. Unless there is a public sector, you cannot run an economy. I remember a friend of mine gave an example of this. Imagine a country is like bus. Now the bus carries passengers, the people. So people benefit out of the bus by getting to places, comfortable journeys, all that. But the bus is driven by engine, and the engine is the private side. So engine is extremely important. But you can't leave the engine to do the job. You need to regulate the engine. And who does the regulation? Gearbox. And where is the gearbox? The government. So the government makes the bus run efficiently and slow down where it matters, accelerate where it matters. So it's basically, but now what we have is a kind of a bus that is decided by the driver. So the driver decides, okay, today we are not running the bus, so the people have to wait. Tomorrow we are not going to Kandy, we are going to Gaul. So those people who want to go to Kandy, please wait. So that's sort of very bad management anyway. So we had the stock market, privatization, all that happened. But of course, 1983, we basically did the nightmare. We had the riots, and it was a time where some of the investors came into Sri Lanka. Big investors, Motorola's, and some of the big guys who had come to Sri Lanka were planning to put up factories. And when the 83 riots came, that brought everything into a reverse order. And then from that history, it's all history. 83 onwards, we were on what we call a civil war. 1995 to 2000 was Mrs. Chandrika Kumaratunga's regime. She brought a new kind of economic policy called liberal economy with human face. So I mean, all this time people say liberal economy is a yaka face in the Devi. So people like to enjoy it, but then we don't want, we fear that. So Chandrika, Mrs. Satellite gave it a human face. Well, it was not her creation, it was in the UN. So human face is you try to put economic growth, but at the same time make sure you have good distribution. But of course, it's all history. The kind of management style she had was put the whole country on a very bad footing. So that's all history. And it put the then came 2000 to 2003 first UNP government, which we call neoliberal government. The policy of the neoliberal government was, let's make the government small, let's not spend a lot of money on the government, public services, we'll give everything to the private sector, which we call trickle-down economics. That means you make few people rich, and they go to casinos, they go to do that, they do that. You know, what happens is, now they will need drivers, and they have 10 cars, wife has 15 cars, so you have 15 drivers, 10 drivers, you know, so it will create employment. So that's a sort of, but that is totally redundant now, unfortunately. Unfortunately, we adopted that, but then that was not possible. Of course, there was a coup, Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe government is out, and Chandrika basically ousted them. And then comes, so there was an important thing, this is called regaining Sri Lanka. The word regaining Sri Lanka is what you call market economy based economic policy. It was a pure market, but it was too sudden. So Ranil Wickremesinghe government understood this mistake. Okay, and we'll come to that in a minute. Then 2003 to 2014 comes Mahinda Rajapaksa regime. He had a socio-economic model. What he did was, he tried to create investment opportunities and income opportunities to the rural masses, so that rural masses because that was a major problem, because all these issues were happening in the periphery. Southern terrorism, northern terrorism, eastern terrorism, these are all peripheral issues. Why? Because the richness in the western province does not go beyond to those peripheral provinces. So he said, okay, I look after the agricultural sector. So what he did was, he did that, and as a result he was able to create some economic transfers to the agriculture. Second, what he did was, he created infrastructure. So he started infrastructure, building, investing a lot of money, which was very visionary, I would say. And also he wanted to settle the war issue, because when you have a large problem in your body, you can't undertake anything that is dynamic. So then third one, what he did was, now with all these issues with Hambantota port, I think what we have not realized about Sri Lanka is, we have not understood the kind of capital we are sitting on. the kind of resources we are sitting on. We only think cash is what is realized, but what is possible is what is cashable, can be transformed into cash. That's what Singapore did. Look at Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is at the bottom of the Asian continent. In fact, after Sri Lanka, there is nothing below. So, entire sea route is passing Sri Lankan waters. So, this is a massive opportunity. That should have happened 25, 30 years ago. We were just looking at tea sector, with the beauty of the tea sector and various other things. Then we came to garments as well. But these are not going to be sustained very long. At the moment, garments is the largest industrial sector, but it's not going to be sustained because we have hit the upper limits of garments. So it can just manage that level. You need something that drives. So one way of looking at this is looking at Sri Lankan geopolitics and trying to translate economics out of that. Two things. One is Sri Lanka can be kind of a feeder center for the rest of the South Asia. Second, you are trying to tap the sea route. Okay, but what happened in 2014? One of the fundamental mistakes Mahinda Rajapaksa regime was they didn't manage. They had the right vision, they had the right kind of things, but they didn't understand that after post-war, people will want something different. People will want something of a different quality. That was not understood. I guess, there's a preoccupation with the war, and I remember when we were, my daughter was going to Methodist college, and during the war, we wake up in the morning, and my wife and I talk, I think it doesn't look very good. The weather is not good. I had a bad dream. We find some reason not to send the killers to school. So out of school days, about 1/3 she's at home. So this is the sort of scenario we all went through. And it was a life or death scenario until you go home. You are not alive until you go home. It was that bad. But then when things changed, it was euphoria and people didn't realize. Anyway, that's a slightly different matter, not for a guy like me. But anyway, that was a mismanagement. Then 2014, there was a change of regime. People said, look, we want what? We want good governance. Everybody said, yes, good governance. And a lot of people who voted for good governance were not anti-Mahinda Rajapaksa. It's just that, they wanted something different. Now, this is the sentiments people have. Anybody who is coming into power in the future will have to follow that as well. Now, these are the dynamics of it. But then what happens is, it was a national government. It's a new concept. So that means there's no opposition. You both put together. The danger is when you don't have an opposition, there's no one to tell you, look, you're wearing the wrong clothes, you're wearing your wife's clothes. Because nobody talks, because both are in the same family. So this kind of scenario. Second was, remember 2000, 2003, the mistake UNP made? So they didn't want to make that mistake, but what they did was, they made an overkill of it. They gave all of us 10,000 rupees. No cash. There's no cash, you don't have cash. I remember I was in one of those interviews in an election, pre-election this thing. I said, this is disaster. 10,000. Some people said, look, we are going to save all the corruption money and then pay it to people. And 10,000 to 1.2 million public sector people without cash is like you're paying out a credit card. And that's exactly what happened. That dislocated the whole thing. You went to the entirely to the other side of the spectrum and you have eaten something that doesn't digest now. You have to cut open the tummy and take it out. Then comes the next one on the bond issue. Anyway, so let's not get into the juicy part of that. But these have brought the economic growth into a different scenario. It really stalled economic growth. And after 2014, you had 7.5% economic growth, and all of a sudden, it falls down to 4.5%. Now we are in the present scenario, 2017, 2018, in South Asia. ADB report says South Asia is the one that should be betting on by everyone because that's where the potential is, growth is. And so we are part of South Asia. Wow, we are doing well. oh God, oh, go into details. You know, where are we? We are just about Afghanistan and Maldives. We are below Bangladesh, Pakistan. India, of course, is a different thing. Everybody else, look, come on, we have something seriously wrong with us. So it's all about managing the economy now. We gave it to the right guys. This is the irony of this country. It's all about, bad dreams. Good dreams turning bad. Anyway, so these are the stories we have. Now, what we need to understand is, a little beyond that, the little nitty-gritty of it. I'll go into some of the. These are. First is what we call GDP. Like anything, if you want to ask about your family, how powerful you are, how much money you earn during the year, how much money you can have during the year. Your son is earning this much, father is earning this much. If you put all together, you are a very formidable economic entity. Country is the same. So GDP is the most fundamental thing, but it's not the most used economic indicator. It's something that you have to calculate first. But what is necessary here is, you will ask, okay, how much I earn more than last year? Now that's what we call economic growth. Now, in order to get GDP, you look at, you need several things. You got to have investments and you got to have labor. Now, out of the GDP, we look at two other variables. One variable is called GDP per capita. What the hell is GDP per capita? Now, if you take Sri Lanka GDP and India GDP, we will say, India will say, hey, look here, what is this, man? You are such a tiny little thing compared to our GDP. That's what the Indians always tell us. When you come to play cricket also, they say, look here, you guys are just 2.1 million population. We can simply sort of powder you. We have got powdered this time for you, unfortunately. But that's not the way to look at. Then guys say, look, no, you have got 1.3 billion. You make a cake, of course you made a cake of 3 trillion worth of cake, but you got to cut that into 1.3 billion people. How much each one is getting? So that's what is GDP per capita. So GDP per capita is a kind of yardstick that tells you, look, it's not the size of the cake, it's how much each one is getting. Does it mean everyone is getting the same? Now, say US, for example, has a GDP per capita something like $44,000 per person per year. So that means everyone in US has $44,000 in their pocket. Rubbish. No. But it's just an indicator. So it just tells you superficially, at least, this tells you whether the country is earning a lot of cash. So if Sri Lankan population, everybody decides, okay, we're going to have 5 babies next 2 years or 3 years. So that means our population is going to grow very rapidly. If that is the case, we have to make the GDP also grow far more rapidly in order to keep ourselves comparable. Otherwise, if you try to produce a lot of children without a lot of GDP, you end up becoming a poor country. So this is the yardstick for rich, poor, middle income, high income, very poor. So if you take sub-Saharan African countries, they have a per capita income less than $500 per person per year. That's extremely little. On the other hand, if you go to a country like Switzerland, European countries, Norway, per capita income is very high. Japan, per capita income is very high. So we are in the per capita, of course, that figure is a little outdated. We are having a per capita, there are different values. We use what we call per capita PPP dollars. PPP dollars is, I suddenly forgot. Yeah. Okay, I'll come back to it. That's a bit of a dementia problem. PPP per capita dollar. If you just take the dollars, you're talking about $1,500, $2,000. Okay, so PPP per capita Sri Lanka's per capita is much higher than China's, much higher than India, but our per capita is less than Maldives. While Maldives has a smaller community and they have a kind of GDP that if you cut it into little pieces, each person is entitled to get more than what Sri Lankans get. But if you go to Maldives, you will see only people living in Malay are rich. Go to other peripheral islands, they are hand to mouth exist. I've been to those places, basically they have not seen anything beyond their little islands. It was that bad. Real growth, this is the real thing about an economy, the sexiest part of the economic data. When somebody looks at it, if you go to see your husband, or you don't go to see your husband, prospective husband, normally the man goes to the wife, prospective wife. Is that correct? How does it work? I can't remember what I did. It's man who goes to see the prospective bride. Am I correct? Right. So you go there and you look for something, I don't know what it is, but different people have different perceptions. You might look for something that is the critical aspect of that particular individual. Now, once that is there, you try to figure out everything else around that. So country is, economic growth is the most fundamental thing. If the economic growth is there, that means it is very attractive. Everybody will be looking forward to be part of that economy. So when economic growth is, if you are talking about China, why China got so attractive? Why? Because for the last 20 years or 25 to 30 years, China was growing at around 10% per year. That's a massive economic. We have not had any occasion where we had got even closer to that. The closest we had was 2012, 2013, 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12. That area, we were riding something like 7.5% to 8%. That was the only occasion. On the other times, when we had economic growth 8%, 7% or something, next year it's 4%. It just goes up and falls down dramatically. So this is so typically any country has economic growth below 5%. You don't even look at it. Oh, not worth looking at, right? But anything over 5% is the one now people talk. You remember when those who know cricket, there was a time when we had the limited over cricket tournaments, and you're very comfortable if you score 5 runs and over. So that means 5 into 50, 250 score is a bloody decent score. Right? But then comes our master blaster and the little dynamo. Right? He was a little taller than my height. And what did they do? They innovated cricket and they said, look, 5 runs per hour, rubbish, 7 runs per hour. So things have changed dramatically. So now in economics also, unless you have 7%, people don't talk to you, don't even pay attention to you. It's not worthwhile. So 7%, that's why India is attracting so much of attention these days, because India is now poised to grow at 7.5%, 8%. And India is a massive country. So you're talking about and there's another China in the making. Maybe of course a long way for India to get to China's level, but that's where it is. And the second aspect is Asia has been producing this kind of master blasters more frequently than any other continent. So therefore everybody is looking at Asia as the place to make investments. Right? And now it's South Asia. Read the ADB report this year, and it says, put your cash in South Asia. But of course, we are not in that league. Then growth in per capita is another one. It's not very common, so that means you just take the per capita, I got the word, PPPs, purchasing power parity. What the hell is that? I mean, you just say dollars. No. The PPP is, we call PPP dollar, not US dollar. What the hell is that? That means, now you can see my haircut, this it cost me 100 rupees in Sri Lanka. But when I was studying in Hong Kong, when I go for a haircut, this haircut, not an expensive place, very average, the guy who is just wayside, say I go there and he has only a little stool, so I can sit there and he cut my hair. That's it. Everybody can see what the hell is going on, right? And he charges me $30, right? Same haircut. Now, when you take Hong Kong economy, when they do 2 haircuts, they add 30 into 2, $60. The same haircut done in Sri Lanka adds 200 rupees. When you convert, you find same haircut, but the value-wise, Sri Lankan haircut has much lower value. Now this is not right. So because of that, countries' GDP values are converted to international values. So if I want to look at Sri Lankan, my haircut, either they must put rupee value to their haircut or I must put dollar value to my haircut. So that means I'm not now, it is, although I paid 100 rupees, the value for GDP per capita is $60. Are you getting it? Okay. So this is the exchange rate is calculated on that basis. How the exchange rate. So this is another interesting thing that comes with this purchasing power parity. McDonald's. I'm sure all of you have tried McDonald's. Now McDonald's is a universal food in any country. There's the same size, same nutritional value. There can be slightly changes in taste. So what the Economist magazine, the magazine, the Bible of economics, which is produced in the UK, did was they calculated how much the McDonald in each of the country, not calculated, just took that. They took that as an exchange rate calculation. For example, in Sri Lanka, how much is the McDonald the burger? 500 rupees? Let's say 500 rupees. In the US, anybody who has had a McDonald burger in the US? No, nobody. Well, let's assume it was $2, right? So if it is $2 there, 500 rupees here. So basically the rupee exchange rate to the dollar, you calculate based on $2 to 500. So which is basically, that's how you calculate the values. So in that way, anyway, that's a little detail, but you understand, you don't get confused. Then you come to another important thing. Now, out of the GDP, by the way, as I'm talking, don't look at me like you're looking at Shah Rukh Khan. You don't ask Shah Rukh Khan anything. You just, oh my goodness, beautiful guy. You're admiring. I mean, I don't have that kind of Shah Rukh Khan look. So that's not there. But then you can simply question, hey, look here, right? We don't understand this. Or I have a different perspective. I love that kind of conversation. So please, just put your hand up and say, look, I like to add something. I like to disagree with you. Okay, please do that. Okay, so domestic savings is now GDP. Now you have made the GDP. GDP is what you are doing, what I am doing. Now what you are doing is not GDP at this point of time because you are a consumer. What I am doing is GDP because I am not coming here for nothing. This is not my dana me puja. They are paying me something. Right? So that adds to the GDP, right? But in your workplace, you are working as well. So your work adds to the GDP as well. So everybody's work at certain market value gets added. And if you add everything, annually you get the GDP. So this is how it goes. So GDP, but out of the GDP, you spend part of it, we call consumption, and the rest is saved. Normally, we save at about 15% of GDP, right? So if everybody saves 15% of GDP totally, so that's what we have for us to do something else. What do you do with savings? Put the savings in the bank. What does the bank do? They do Malagaha savings. Oh, what do? They call people and say, look, we got cash, we can lend to you. And what do? They take that cash and try to create production or investment. So technically speaking, if you have 15% GDP on savings, we could say savings divided by GDP is about 15%. That's the amount of money you have for investments. Anyway, so that's the. But on top of that, let me just make another point here. When we say savings, we don't only rely on our savings. What about Janet, who is in Dubai? What about Sunil, who is in Abu Dhabi? What about Lalit, who is in Qatar? He's sending money. That money also gets added here. Then there is Michael Hunter from Scotland working here, and he has his family. So he sends back his money to his family. If he doesn't send money back, he doesn't have a house to go because wife will not accept him. So he has to send the money. So that means if you adjust these things, you end up what we call cross-national savings. Since Sri Lanka has a lot of money coming into the country because of those poor people who have gone abroad and sent in the money. By the way, I can tell you guys, you engineers, we lecturers go abroad, we don't send money here because we take the family there. So we don't have to send the money. What do we do? I look for places to invest. So I put my cash in Singapore stock market. I put my cash in some other things. So basically, you guys and us are not part of that big sacrifice those poor people are doing. They bring in something like $7.5 billion to about $7.5 billion to this country. So that adds to our savings. So if you add those monies into it, you get national savings, which works out to about 20%, 21% of GDP. Okay? Then it matters a lot. Then companies also save. Now in the whole domestic savings, there are three categories. One is called households, you and I. Second, companies. When the companies make profits, we call corporate savings. Then the government save. Have you heard of government saving? It does not happen in this country because we don't understand savings. We understand spending other people's money. We just spend money. So in the Sri Lankan breakdown, you find government savings are negative, heavily negative. Corporate savings are positive, and household savings are positive. So you add up these things. That's another way of arriving at these figures. Then, why do we need savings? Why do we need savings? You might say, okay, my father gets a pension, he put his money and then he gets a little interest. That's a little micro scenario. The macro scenario is savings are necessary for this. We said our starting point is running the bus, but to get the bus running, you got to have a bus in the first place, and the bus is the investment. Now, investment had to be financed. What do? We get the finances from what is available in the country. Now, if you want to, I said, we got to play master blaster cricket. That means you got to have 8%, 9%, at least 8% economic growth. But to get the 8% economic, we got to have a good bus investment. How good the bus should be? The bus should at least have about 35% of GDP invested on the bus. So that means investment demand is, let's say 32%. Now you have an equation of 25% your cash. You need to spend 32%. Where the hell you get that 7%? That's where you go around with a begging bowl and say, look, we give us some development aid. We went to the World Bank, we go to ADB, we go to European Union, and now we go to China. Go with the begging bowl. That money, the more you try to invest, since you have no way of increasing your savings, you got to borrow. So the borrowings are part and parcel of life, right? But what is important is, we'll come to that later on, borrowings have to be managed. You don't get your housing loan from State Mortgage Bank and run a birthday party. You don't do that. Right? You don't get your housing loan and buy a BMW. You don't do that. So when you do that, you are heading to serious disaster. Productivity is a important thing, but countries like us, it's not so much about productivity, getting people to work. We have a lot of people who are not doing the work. There is a lot of idling people. But if you can take a country like Japan, the people idle either. No, it's not so much about the idling, it's about the productivity. People have to be productive. How do you make themselves productive? Have good systems, have good machinery, have good education. So that gives you productivity. Of course, this part of the world, Sri Lanka in particular, we are also trying to have certain kind of productivity by, why are you doing your charter? Well, you're trying to be more productive. You're trying to be more human capital, right? You're trying to be more informed. If you take the Sri Lanka's balance sheet, assets and liabilities, this is liabilities is we don't have enough capital. We don't have to depend on raw material. We don't have a lot of raw materials, oil, energy. Then we have infrastructure which still needs a fair amount of upgrading, and policy changes. This is very unfortunate because it's not trusted upon us. Policy is our damn decision. But what we do is, things that you can handle, you handle so badly, and it make a pressure on everything else. Imagine you are the Gurumulika of the house. You make some absolute stupid decisions, and who suffers? The entire family. And not only that, it's in the current terms it suffers. You're sacrificing the future as well. Oh, no, I switch out of this slide because I want to get into the details. Now, this slide should be there. Now, when it comes to economics discussion, I was talking about GDP growth and all that. You put into two different aspects. One is called leading aspects. The other is called lagged aspects. Leading aspects is, like now when it is raining, you look at the dark clouds, it's going to rain. That's a leading indicator. Okay. Now, when there is lightning, you see the light comes. Then what do? You put that. There's something else coming behind. That's called a lagged indicator. So economics also there is something like that. Very often now, see, if the economic growth takes place, you don't see people are getting jobs as frequently as you like. It will take a little time. It will not improve people's living standards immediately. It will, but then it will engage people. Then also, when you make investments, very often the results of investment take place next year after. So it's a lagged. Investments changes are leading, and what is happening out as a result are lagged values. Now I was talking about this rate of growth per capita. Now then I look at, I mentioned something like inflation, which has to be taken care of. I spoke about domestic savings. I spoke about national investments. I did not speak about structure of the economy. What is the structure of the economy? This is also looking at the GDP, where the hell is GDP coming from? Normally, we look at the GDP from three different angles: agriculture, industry, and services. During the plantation times, we had agriculture dominating. Services almost nothing. Industry, nothing. Because we don't do any processing in Sri Lanka. What did the Suddhas do? They collected tea, put them into gunnies, and sent to London. So all the processing, bagging, labeling happens in London. Okay. So whereas if you look at in the post 70s, tea has been coming down, agriculture has been coming down, and we had an emerging sector. What is that emerging sector? Guns, right? So one of the, perhaps the best success story out of now post 1977 was garments, and now garments are earning something like $6.5 billion. Remember, garments are still below remittances very well, and remittances are net cash. You don't pay back anything. Garments, you get about $7 billion, but a large chunk of it is going back for raw materials. Anyway, so that's an industry. If you had more industries, you would find in the GDP, industry piece is getting bigger and proportionately higher. Then you have the last piece called services. What has happened in the recent past was services sector has come up very rapidly. Anyway, I'll come to some of these things quickly later on. Then there's something called capital output ratio. Capital output ratio is another indicator we come across. That is to say that if you want to get something out, if you have to work hard, put a lot of cash into it, that means output is smaller compared to inputs. Okay. So if the capital output ratio is in favor of the capital, that means your values are smaller. So that means that country is inefficient. So just remember that. Then there is other indicators we will be coming across: economic indicators, budget surplus, balance of payments. Then there are social indicators. I'm just giving you some of these things. Now these are areas where Sri Lanka had made fair amount of progress. We call social indicators or outcome indicators. Then there are political indicators. Now this is a whole list of stuff. Regularity of elections, that's where the Yahapalana government is under heavy jurisdiction of the people to say, look where the elections are. Indrajith Aponsu regime had too many elections, we were complaining, look, this is a waste of money. So it's anyway. Then so these are some of the indicators. One of the things Indrajith Aponsu regime was heavily criticized for is the last one, corruption. So now pot is telling the kettle black. So these are very ironic scenarios in this country. Then there are outcome indicators. Then there are input indicators. Now what I'm trying to show you here is, these are different values you come across. So let me just, then there is a level of aggregation as well. If you look at economic values, say GDP for example, you will find about 50% of GDP is in the Western province. So aggregation, now we have, if you look at economic indicators, you have aggregated and segregated the pieces, so which gives you much better understanding why it is happening. If you look at GDP segregation between provinces, you find some of the poorest provinces are Eastern Province, Northern Province, and the Monaragala and that Uva Province. Those are provinces. And some of the richest provinces are Western Province, then to a certain extent the Southern Province in the recent times, and the Central Province. Then there are quantitative indicators and qualitative indicators. I don't want to go into a lot of details. I just, out of the things that I mentioned, you can put them into baskets. Like qualitative indicators are how good you looking, how good looking are you. It's a qualitative indicator. But on the other hand, if someone says, how tall are you? That's a quantitative indicator. That's precise. So qualitative indicators are more perspective. Then there are other indicators like life expectancy, life satisfaction, ecological footprint. These are new things. In fact, today I was trying to go to a lecture at the central bank. It's about green accounting. Green accounting means when you take GDP, especially architects know this, they value the greenness, which we don't give a value. But now if you take Sri Lanka, it has a very high value for its environmental side compared to, say, China, for example. China has a huge GDP but extremely bad ecological values. So these are some of the new things. Now I come to the nitty-gritty of it. Let me just, how long I go? 7:30. 7:30? Oh, 7 o'clock? Huh. Right. So can we go till 7:30? Are we okay? I mean, those who have a problem, just okay, feel continue. All right, okay. Okay, so let's quickly browse through it. Now, let me just take one quick one here. In the case of GDP, there are two GDP values you come across. One is called nominal GDP and the other is called real GDP. What if we say GDP? Value of the production. How do you get value? Quantity into price. Okay. Now, if you want to have a value, if the price goes up, the value goes up. Now, but price doesn't make anything in the economic sense. Why? If you are paying higher price, somebody is getting that higher price. So it gets net off. So what really matters is how many coconuts you have produced, not how much at what price you sold the coconuts. Okay. For example, you have a estate, you produce 1,000 pieces of coconut, right? And you sold it for 50 rupees a piece. So 1,000 into 50, 50,000. Next year, your production is 900, but the coconut's price have gone up to 100. So that means now your income is 90,000 compared to 50,000. So nominally your income has gone up, but real terms your income has come down. Why? Because your production is not even 50,000, it's 45,000. So real is you take the price factor out. How do you take the price factor out? You take the price factor out this way. You take, okay, 5 years, 5 levels of quantities, 5 levels of prices. Don't take 5 levels of prices, take 1 million price and value everything with that price. We call constant pricing, right? So that we call real GDP. So real GDP is the one we normally take when you talk of economic growth, not the nominal GDP. Nominal GDP is what we call including price. So real GDP is the one. Then so these are some of the attributes of real GDP. I pass this. Now when I say 5%, 6%, 7%, it's the real GDP. So how to convert the real GDP into nominal GDP into real GDP? You take the price index on each year, you get E for each year, but you take one particular year's price index and calculate all the GDP values using that price index. So you're not taking oranges, say coconut to this year's your coconut harvest is 100 rupees. No, you don't take 100. You take some previous years. But if you want to take it 100, then you take everything at 100. It doesn't matter which year. It doesn't matter which year. So if you take 100, so that's 2016 prices, then you say real GDP at 2016 prices. So that means 2016, 2015, 2014, 2013, they are all valued at 2016 prices. Okay, so constant prices, which we call real GDP. So real per capita income as well. I meant structure of the economy. Now this is another kind of thinking, that is, countries that have a high agriculture tend to be poor countries. Countries that have high industry tend to be very dynamic countries. This is why we try to transform from agriculture based to industry in the post 77 era. Okay. Highly advanced countries are normally very service oriented. Say US economy, for example, has a very high level of servicing. Go to Switzerland, high level of service. Hong Kong, high level of service. Singapore, high level of service. Okay. Japan, high level of course, in Japan is an exception. It has high level of production, industry, and high level of service. But it have a very small agriculture. But go to Africa, they have a high level of agriculture, almost no services, very poor industry. I mentioned about this. I was talking about national savings as well. I skipped this, but let me just make one quick remark here. There's something called economy has to have cash. Now, there is a thinking that if you have a lot of cash, then what happens is for the same thing, you surrender a lot of cash. Now, how does this cash get into the system? Who has the privilege to produce cash? Government. If you and I produce cash, what happens? We end up in value surrender, right? Because it's illegal. Why it is illegal? Because only government has the jurisdiction to produce cash. Now, government also doesn't have the jurisdiction to produce cash. Normally, it's a central bank. So, central bankers are supposed to be totally independent of governments. What the governments normally do is, they put their guy in the central bank and tell the central bank, hey, we need some cash. Right? So, what does the central bank do? We call it printing of money. What is printing of money? Actually, they don't print money. They have money printed in the basement. All what they do is, that money is not money. That money is just printed pieces of paper. Because central bank money is not money. Central bank has to find someone to give that money. So that guy is indebted to central bank. Okay? And who is that guy? Not you and I. Government. When the government is short of cash, government can do three things. One is, government tell people, look, I need some cash. So we call what you call a public auction of bonds. Bond is the instrument. So people just give money and take that piece of paper. See, you have an investment in the central government and you're not worried at all because government is not going to default. So that investment we call sovereign investment. Or government can borrow from banks. Third, government can borrow from central bank. When the government borrows from central banks, we call printing of money. Why? It just brings cash out of nowhere. That cash was just idling there. So when that cash comes in, that amount, say if the government gets borrow money from the central bank, say 50 billion rupees, tomorrow you find 50 billion rupees in circulation in the system. Okay? So normally the argument is when you put cash like that, it can cause a lot of inflation. Right? There's a lot of cash in comparison to what is available as hard assets and resources. Okay? But nevertheless, governments borrow. This government has borrowed one of the heaviest borrowings ever in the history. Because when you don't have a lot of cash, when you don't have a lot of money to borrow from, the only way you can do that is, you were given 10,000. How did you get that? Printed money. Okay, so that's the beauty of it. So there are two ways, several ways of looking at the amount of cash. M1 is hard cash, demand, things that are most liquid cash. M2 is you have fixed deposits, time deposits plus cash. So, but now there's very little difference between the two. If you put a fixed deposit, you get an overdraft against that, then it becomes cash. Then the investments, we spoke about investment. But one thing about investment is there's a minimum level of investment without which the countries can't think of running the bus. So Sri Lanka was running around 25%, 27% investments. Not enough. That's why we are lagging behind. Look at Malaysia, 33% plus. China, almost about 36 to 40%. So that explains why China is running like a juggernaut. So I was talking about productivity, inflation. This is the real thing. Imagine you are driving your car. When your car is driving, if there are some issues in the engine, oil leak, what happened to the inflation? You suddenly see the temperature goes up. Why are you worried? It's going to seize the engine. It's going to ruin the engine. So in a country it's also like that. This inflation thing is not something that we look forward to, but it happens. In our body is also inflation. When the temperature goes up, you know something is wrong somewhere. It's an indicator of a serious anomaly in the system. So inflation. But then does it mean the inflation is bad always? If your temperature goes down, again it's a bad thing. You know, imagine your car, and if you are in a country where cold temperatures are very frequent, one of the fundamental problems of the car drivers is getting the damn car started. So you need to have a certain amount of inflation as well. But what is bad is excessive inflation. So inflation so you need inflation, inflation is prices going up. What is inflation? What percentage of prices have gone? By 1%? What percentage? So then people will say, look, fish prices have gone up, vegetable prices have gone down. So what the heck? So what happens is there is a institution, Census or Department of Census and Statistics. They collect all those prices, put together into a certain model, and say, okay, overall they calculate what is called price index. And there is a common price index we have now, consumer price index. Earlier we had what we call Colombo Consumer Price Index, which was defined in 1952. Now in that index there are several categories: food category, housing category, transport. Now it has been enlarged with so many other things, mobile telephones, and because lifestyles have changed, people consumption patterns have changed. So therefore, if you look at that index, you know this where the hell is inflation getting out of control. Two ways: one is called demand pull, the other is cost push. Demand pull is prices can go up because suddenly people decide, now how many of you buy brown sugar? So a few years ago, brown sugar was very cheap. People don't buy. I remember I used to buy brown sugar for a long period of time, and I liked that taste, and it was just very cheap. But now what has happened to brown sugar? Brown sugar is overtaken. Why? Because as the demand goes up, the prices get pushed up. Now that's brown sugar, but overall we say with that 10,000 rupees, one thing that can create is, now everybody say husband and wife. So your wife is also a government servant. You're a government servant, right? No, you're not. Oh, your wife, right? Okay. You got 10,000, but you missed the 10,000. So imagine that he is also a government servant, 20,000 rupees. Now you suddenly find 20,000 rupees extra in your pocket. What do? Come, Puta, young, let's go, have a nice time. So you suddenly change your consumption pattern and create demand. So when government infuse cash into the system, we call demand pull inflation. If the government carries a lot of budget deficit, demand pull inflation. If the government, Mahavali project for example, create a lot of demand pull inflation because it put a lot of pressure on the resources. Cost push. Cost push is very often happen if the wages go up in the private sector. Oil prices go up. Energy prices go up. Now take for example this drought. If not for that the government kept the electricity rate at a certain level, if you had put it in the market level, that would have shot up. So the cost is pushing the prices up. Demand pull is market prices are going up because there is a lot of pressure on the demand. And normally inflation, we say double-digit inflation is very bad, meaning anything over 10%, 10% or more. The rule of thumb is 10% or more inflation is real trouble. But Sri Lanka survived inflation even at 20%. We were a very high inflation country. But of course, during Mahinda regime time, the inflation was brought down dramatically with various things. And that inflation came down to about 3% below that. That was unprecedented. But then now what has happened is, you can look at some of the figures, inflation has gone on the opposite direction. That is because partly interest rates have gone up, the cost push, partly demand pull, there was a lot of cash being put into circulation. Right. Now there are countries which have incredible levels of inflation. Zimbabwe had some inflation like 30,000-40,000 rupees percent. That means, if you just pass your cash from this pocket to this pocket, your money has evaporated. What does it mean? It means the thing that the money can buy evaporates very rapidly. So what do people do? What has happened in Venezuela? People rush to buy things. When people rush to buy things, because the money that you have, if you keep it for one day, you can buy half of what you want to buy today. So these are some of the inflation indicators we have. So high inflation, why the inflation is bad? If you have high inflation, banks will demand high interest rates. Exchange rate is going to depreciate. And budget deficit is going to expand. Why? When the prices go up, government have to buy things at the high prices, and people have to be paid high prices. So that means budget is going to, expenditure goes up and revenue goes down. While the revenue goes down, when there is inflation, the private sector is discouraged. Production is discouraged. And on the other hand, once inflation put pressure on interest rates, now interest rate put pressure on inflation again. So it becomes a vicious cycle. When the exchange rate depreciates, say take for example Sri Lankan rupee exchange rate 2 years ago was some 132 rupees, now it is 155 rupees a dollar. Now if the exchange rate goes up to, so in that passage of change, everything you buy now from abroad, which we buy, is going to cause a lot of pressure. Of course, there was one luxury this government was in, that was oil prices came down dramatically in 2015. This was a godsend saving for this government. If the oil prices had gone up at least by say 30-40%, and that would have ruined everything. Fortunately, so exchange rate pressure was not translated into domestic prices very much. And then there are countries which have inflation below 0%. Japan has what we call deflation problem. Deflation means prices are going up, people are not buying things. Sometimes we argue when the prices are going up, people wait. Okay, we'll wait for further down. When that is the trend anyway. So there are some other different reasons. Then the budget, government expenditure is one side, and when the government expenditure is going up, very often it pressure on the imports, it puts inflation, and it creates indebtedness. And government revenue, on the other hand, if you have government revenue, government has more revenue, that means government has more cash in their disposal and they can do a lot of things. The present government, when they gave salary increases and all the other stuff, they ran short of cash, and how did they manage to survive? They couldn't get the revenues up. Then what did they do? They taxed everybody left and right, and we call it VAT. Okay, they bat the VAT, and everybody, beggar to kings, everybody had to pay that 10,000 rupees. Then the deficit also has a further issue. When you have a large deficit, it has a shortfall, but then there is another problem. How you manage your deficit. If your deficit is financed from short-term cash, let's say 1 year borrowings, that means next year you're going to have a serious problem of interest rates and repayments. So size matters and the way it is paid matters. Then there's another term called terms of trade. Terms of trade is another index. What is that? That means what we pay for imports and what foreigners pay for our exports. Now, over the past, this is why tea became such a headache to us. What happened was tea prices began to come down, and whatever we bought from the rest of the world went up. So it was just putting into a perspective. Say in 1930s, if you want to buy a BMW, let's say you can buy it with 1 metric ton of tea. But to buy the same BMW, let's assume that it's the same BMW, buying after say in 1970s, you probably will have to give 2 metric tons of tea. Same BMW. So that's we call terms of trade in Sri Lanka has gone down, and as a result, we have to pay out more resources to get the same thing. So this has become quite a phenomenon for many developing countries. In fact, some people say it is the terms of trade that had made countries so poor, because it's not that they are not working, they are not getting paid, they are not getting the returns for the goods they produce. So what some countries do is they move out of it. That's what Japan did, that's what South Korea did. They said, okay, if the prices are going out, we'll go to something where we can increase the prices. So they went to Hyundai, Gold Star, Samsung. They started producing things where they can command prices. So as a result, they could reverse the process of terms of trade in their favor. Okay. Another problem we have is we spend more on imports than what we earn. So we have a huge problem of trade balance. When you have more dollars being spent than what we have, you obviously asking for serious problems. So this is persistently happening. Of course, this is very much happening in the US as well. But US has no problem as far as compared to us. Why? When we import, we have to pay in dollars. So if you don't have dollars, what do? We have to borrow. So when we borrow, what does that mean? We have to pay back the loan and pay back the interest as well. Then what about the US? Those guys don't have that problem. Why? They produce dollars. So this is what the Americans are doing. They have a huge debt mountain in the world, the largest debt mountain, $13.5 trillion. But no issue, no serious issue. That is why Americans are trying so hard to keep the dollar as the international currency. That's why they bombed Gaddafi off. That's why they got rid of Saddam Hussein as well. Okay, they are dictatorships, all right, but that was a guide. Basically, it was economics. The other matter is now we was talking about the domestic economy. Then there is something with the rest of the world, which we call capital account. When you have a problem with not enough dollars, say at home, you don't have enough cash, you want to have a house, build a house, you want to eat. So what do? We borrow cash from banks and other places. There are two kinds of borrowings we make. One borrowing is we borrow for day-to-day expenses. Those are short-term. Second, we borrow for long-term. That's where we have the capital account. But fact of the matter is, unless we have that borrowing, we can't balance the household scenario. Okay? So you want to have a house, you want to spend on the house, but you don't have cash, so you borrow. So capital account is basically when you have a shortfall, you get the capital account. Now the capital account can come in three different ways. One is capital account, you can get someone to borrow. You borrow money. Second, you tell, I want a house. You tell the bank, you put up the house. I live in that house. And that we call FDI, foreign direct investments. So foreign direct investments is, you tell people, okay, you bring cash, start factories, right? And you can get the earnings. Third, you tell them, look here, we are very poor, please give us some cash. And we call it grants. And there was a time where we used to get a lot of grants. Maha Valley was entirely grants based, by and large. If you look at Victoria Dam was granted by the UK, you know, it was all grants. But that grant is gone because those guys are in deep trouble as well. One thing. So the grants are no more in, even if there are grants, they come in small quantities. It's all borrowings. Or the other, you get FDIs to come in. FDI means somebody comes in, so you have no obligation to pay back. Somebody comes with investment. It's good. Why? Because he comes here, he starts a business, and he creates exports. So that means there will be dollars and there will be employment taking place. But you've got to manage it well. If you don't manage it well, you end up becoming somebody else's mistress. Basically, you have no right. So that is why there is a lot of antipathy towards a Market port and issues, because people consider that it's not the way to look at it. But then if you look at Shangri-La, for example, there are issues with regard to ownership. Anyway, those are the details, but it's a FDI coming in. But what is really important for this country is, there's technology coming in. Tourism is one area, but then it's not our bread and butter. Our bread and butter should be industries. So we must get industries to come into this country and create investments. But there are issues. Then the overall balance is, if people borrowed money or FDIs all coming in, now you look at your cash at the household, say, oh, look, we have some extra cash. Okay, then we call it, we have an overall balance. So country have to have an overall balance positive. You can't have a negative overall balance. But is it possible that the negative overall balances are there? Yes. How? What happens when you have extra cash? You put that cash in gold. You put that cash in some kind of additional reserves. When you don't have cash, what do? You go and pawn the jewelry, or you sell the jewelry. So that means your reserves go down. Okay. When you don't have cash, I have seen some of these businessmen. They have a lot of gold. I ask them, why are you carrying a lot of gold? No, that's when things go wrong, you sell that. That's your reserves. When you are not a businessman, we have another way. Your wife's wedding necklace, your wedding ring. Those are things, your ultimate reserve. Sometimes you have to go down to that level as well. Right? Countries as well. Countries, when you have an overall balance, there's something called reserves. The amount of reserves go up. Now, during Mahinda's time, the amount of reserves went up to about 8.5 billion. But then I remember Harsha was talking about, look, that was all borrowed money. Well, yes, he's right. It was not something you earned when the cash was coming in. But this government got into deep trouble because you messed up the capital account. How? Chinese were giving a lot of cash. You told the Chinese, look, I don't like your eyes, you look a little flat face and all that stuff. And then told the Chinese, pack up and go. Now here, Port City, for example, Chinese president comes here and, China is the largest financier in the world now. We tell them, we don't understand the simple logic. We tell the fellow, look, get out. He said, right, fine. And then you had to go back because you got into a serious trouble. Your overall balance started depleting. Then what happens? When you get into negative, you have to pump out reserves. So what's the problem? Now the reserves come down to about 5 million. What's the problem? When the reserves go down, anybody who is lending to you say, hey, don't lend to this guy. He's in deep trouble. How do you measure? Normally, how do you measure is your reserves are divided by amount of imports bill per month. So we call it months of imports cover. If you have imports cover around 6.5 months, you are comfortable. But if it hits 3.5 months, you are in deep trouble. That means now your borrowings are going to be harder, your borrowings are going to be more expensive, because when you are bad, nobody gives you, and even if someone gives you, it gives you at a high interest rate. Banks don't give you that. It happens at home. If your assets look very bad, but bank says, look, no, you can't. Your crib has some issues there. You are not been paying. We can't give you. So what do? We go to the guy who gives you without asking any questions, but his interest rates are 30%, whereas the bank was giving at 15%. Okay. So this is what we get into when you don't manage things. So this is, I told you, so I mentioned to you reserves. Then the foreign debt is another area. There's a lot of issues about foreign debt. What level of foreign debt? At the moment, the foreign debt we have is around 84% or something, 84% of GDP. And it was to brought down to something like 60%. But then what happened was, you have to borrow. So this is another indicator of the health of the economy. Then exchange rate. Exchange rate has two values. How much is a dollar? 155 rupees. How much dollar has depreciated over the last year? Say 10%, 15%. We call it a nominal depreciation. But normally, who asks for depreciations? Normally, depreciations are demanded by exporters. But if you want to promote exports, you need to keep the rupee value low, dollar value high. What the hell is that? It's very simple. Let's say I'm an exporter. I'm mass exporting shirts. So my shirt is 1,000 rupees. Let's say a dollar is 100 rupees. So that means I price my shirt at $10. Okay. Now for some reason, if the dollar exchange rate is depreciated, rupee depreciated, so now it is not 100, 125. Now how much of dollars I get now? I now $8. But I still get 1,000 rupees. This local guy spends 1,000 rupees on the shirt, so his price is 1,000 rupees. Okay, but he can sell the shirt to the rest of the world at $8, whereas earlier he had to sell it at $10. Now what happens? When it is $10, now that guy takes a quotation from Dhaka, Bangladesh. He says, I'll give it at 8.5. You don't get your business. So the exporters have to bring the world prices down, their international prices down. That can be possible if the exchange rate is depreciated. So that is why exporters are very much in favor. Importers are very much against, because if you depreciate the exchange rate, what happens is the imports become more expensive. Now, having said that, this is not that easy. If you depreciate the currency, you have inflation hitting. If you depreciate the currency, you have a budget deficit coming. If you depreciate the currency, people are going to have serious problems of living. On the other side of it, if you want to have economic growth, you need to export. You need to produce locally. In order to do that, depreciate the currency. So depreciate the currency means more exports, more domestic production. Why? Because the imports are becoming expensive. So as you can see here, this economic management it's an art that requires a lot of things to do different times depending on the circumstances. But if you don't get it right. So real exchange rate, on the other hand, is that we were talking about inflation. Just take out the inflation part out. Let's say exchange rate has depreciated by 10%, inflation was 5%, currency has actually depreciated by 5%. If the inflation was 15%, currency has depreciated by 10%, actually the real exchange rate appreciated by 5%. Are you getting my point? You're not. Okay. When you look at me like that, I can say that you're definitely not getting my point. I said exporters want to have more rupees into their hands. But on the other hand, if the domestic prices have gone up, now they was producing shirts at 1,000 rupees. If the inflation was 10%, what happened to your cost? Now you can't produce the same shirt at 1,000 rupees. How much are you producing it? 1,100 rupees. Okay. So now the dollar rate must compensate that. So dollar must depreciate more than inflation if you want to have the exporters benefiting out of these opposite scenarios. Okay. Anyway, that's the detail of it. But I think if you just sit down and have a little beer or and look at it, you might see the scenario easily. But this is economists normally use real exchange rate, which is the discounted exchange rate depreciation with inflation. So now what happens when the currencies depreciate or appreciate? I have told you currencies can appreciate if, say, Hambantota port deal brings in 1.2 billion to this country. What will have the exchange rate? Dollar rate will, exchange rate will go in favor of rupees. It is 155. Supposing if you are looking at making some payments in dollars, and if there's some money to come in, you can definitely expect exchange rate to go in favor of rupees. That means it will be 151 rupees. Okay. On the other hand, if there is a huge oil bill to come in the next month, and expect exchange rate is going to go in the opposite direction. Okay. So appreciation and depreciation takes place depending on the demand. Sometimes when there is a possibility of, if people think exchange rate is had to depreciate, then we call speculative demand on the exchange rate. Now this can really affect the exchange rate. You must have heard a guy called George Soros. He became a billionaire on this exchange rate thing. When the sterling pound was crashing, what he did was, he was betting on the exchange sterling. Central Bank, Bank of England was trying its level best to keep the sterling at a certain level without crashing. But he predicted it's going to crash. So what he did was, whatever the money Central Bank was putting into to hold the exchange rate, he was just buying it. And now he buys it at a certain price. Now the damn thing falls to by 15% just overnight, and he just sells it. He makes a kill of billions of sterling overnight. That's what happened to George Soros, and there are a lot of speculators who do that. Depreciation can take place for some reason. Say, for example, if Ravi Karnanayaka's issue is going to create a serious, because the foreign minister, my goodness, what this fellow has done, and as a result, investors are suddenly get very jittery. They say, look here, we're going to get out. Now that means everybody starts pulling out cash. Then what about the dollars? Dollar rate shoots up, which we call capital flight. Fortunately, this has not happened, but if you look at some of the statistics, you find that foreigners have been pulling out cash for a number of reasons, but this can be one reason as well. Then there is something called overvalued currency and undervalued currency. Now this is what happened in Mahinda Rajapaksa's regime. Dollar is working on one dynamics, inflation working on another dynamics. What Mahinda regime did was, they manipulated the exchange rate in order to keep the inflation low. So they artificially kept the exchange rate, rupee, at a higher level than what it's supposed to be. Then we call overvalued exchange rate, overvalued rupee, and that is bad for exports. When you try to keep an overvalued rupee, it eats into your reserves, because every time you want to hold on to the exchange rate, you have to pump your reserves out into the market. Why? When there is a shortfall in dollar, what happened to the dollar price? It goes up. If someone puts dollars into the market, the shortfall is managed. And who will be able to do that? Central bank. And where does that cash come from? Reserves. In fact, the present governments probably would have made a lot of reserves, should have made a lot of reserves on oil. When you had oil $130 a barrel, comes down to $30 a barrel, let's say not 30, $60 a barrel, you're talking about 50% saving on oil. And if your oil bill is about $8 billion and you are saving half of that, you're talking about $4 billion cash dollars in your holding. So that should have really inflated your reserves. But then what happened was, when your exchange rate is going down, you're worried, you're panicking, and then what happens is you pump that cash into this. If you had saved that dollars, $8 billion or $4 billion, you'd have bought several Hambantota reports. Okay, that's the equation. So economics is it's very, very sad, very ironic that we are poor not because we are poor. We don't know how to handle things, and we don't know how to manage things. In the previous regime, also when they were getting cash, if they had managed their cash as real valuable assets and real valuable liabilities, would have got much more out of it. Anyway, this is since you and I are not in the controlling levels, we have to just sit and wait. Then the other reason why currencies can, if the US raises their interest rates by say 0.5%, the whole world will suddenly see money sucked out of them into the US. Why? Because everybody wants to invest in the US, but they know that they never default. So, and the US has the ability to get large funds, very large funds. When that happens, the monies which are invested here suddenly move out of here. So that means it was not your fault, it was somebody else's economic policy which can have serious impact. At the moment, US is not doing that. I was just reading US economy is going improving. When the US economy normally starts improving, they are worried about inflation. So when they are worried about inflation, they will say, okay, hold on, don't spend a lot. How do you spend that? How do you get that happen? Make it expensive. How do you make it expensive? Raise interest rates. When you raise interest rates, people borrow less and the demand goes down. Okay. So despite the US economy is going up, they have decided they're not going to fiddle with the exchange interest rate. So therefore, the economic scenario in the rest of the world is not going to be. Then there is another thing about the exchange rate is peg floats. This is we don't have a peg exchange rate now, but there was a time we used to peg it to US dollar. When the US dollar goes up, we go up. Now what we say is, we are not pegged. We are supposed to be very free floating. Not exactly. It's done in a very indirect way in compared to the direct. Now then there are linked currencies. If you go to Maldives, the Maldives rupiah, I think rupiah is fixed to US dollars at fixed rate. Same thing happened in Hong Kong as well. Hong Kong dollar exchanges with the dollar exactly at the same value. So these are other bits and pieces. I think that's what I want to do. I just take you down to Sri Lankan story. Very quickly. Now this is the story of the GDP. As you can see here, there are big towers in 2011 and 2012. 2013 and 2014 were deliberately made small by the present government, because what they did was they changed when you're calculating the real GDP, you change the year. When you change the year, what happened was these ones got bigger, these ones got smaller. This is a political reason, because now this is close to this So it's more comparable with this. But then it really took this up in a huge scale. But originally it was around 7.5%, 8%. This was also 7.5%. This was also around 7%. Now what has happened here is, this is the second scenario. You can see it is on a much lower plateau. This is the inflation story. As you could see here, this is from July, mid 2012. It was coming down nicely, but then it shot up fairly rapidly. So this is another scenario. This inflation was, as I told you, caused by three reasons. One is exchange rate depreciation. It depreciated quite dramatically. Second, interest rates jacked up because of all these perpetual securities and all that stuff. It was unprecedented. Interest rates don't rise by 2.5% to 3% overnight. You only raise interest rate for a policy reason, not for stupid reasons like this, which was extremely costly for the people. Then the third was that the excessive expenditure on the public sector, you and I, not you, your wife. Now this is the balance of payment. As you can see, when it is below the line means it's negative. As you can see, its negativity is rising, so which is quite a concern. And this is what we call the trade balance. Trade balance is exports minus imports. We have to make a huge turnaround if we are to rectify this situation. This is the government revenue and expenditure. As you could see here, 2015, the highest tower, we have got expenditure at 20.5 as compared to other years. I think there was a slight decline was expected, and this revenue has gone up a little bit, 13.1. This was because of the VAT, got every beggar to pay, right? So they are predicting some figures for 2015. This is half yearly figures. Now this particular document is available on the central bank site. Now this is monetary aggregates, the amount of money. As you could see here, there's a sudden bulge in money. That means there's a sudden infusion of money. That means this government had printed heavily. There was a jump here, but then there was a plateau, and you can see it has jumped quite heavily in the 2016 because one of the highest money printing had ever taken place in history. So this is the most up-to-date information available, right? So that's where I stop my presentation. Yep. Say it again. Debt of who? Right. Now there are two kinds of debt. The people borrow from the banking sector. That's a domestic debt level. It's a domestic issue. Government borrows from the rest of the world, and private sector borrows from the rest of the world. So normally when you talk about debt, we are basically talking about the latter. That is how much the borrowing that we have taken place from the rest of the world. Let me also make another point. Did I answer your question? What do you mean it's okay? You don't want to trouble me. They are removing the expenses. Right now, because the thing is, Donald Trump is trying to bring the cost down. So that's why he's because military is one of the largest expenses in the US. So and also the US's military is not only in the US, for the rest of the world as well. So Donald Trump goes around and says, look here, don't pay us to get us to pay, you pay your debt. So he's trying to manage his expenses as well. But that is not people's expenditure. Americans are heavily indebted, because they are living on credit cards. So that's yet a different issue, which has an internal social issue, income scenario. But Americans' problem is they are living on a large debt to the rest of the world. That's about 13.5 trillion. Greece had the same problem. The problem Greece problem was not as bad as American problem. But how come Greece got into problem? Because Greece is a small country, first. Second, Greece had to borrow from someone else. Right? And third, Greece had to borrow from EU, European Union, European Bank. And when they lend, they said, look, you can't eat meat, you can't have eggs, you can't have soups, right? You have to be standing, you can't be using mattresses. They stipulated so many restrictions on your expenses. Now, this is we call austerity measures. Those austerity measures, I argue, a lot of other people argue, are bad for people because it affects the very core of humans. Second, it doesn't allow Greece to pay back their money because you are given cash, but you are told don't spend on anything that we say no. So as a result, their hands are bound. Hands are bound means they can't create money in the domestic economy, creating domestic demand and all that. So these are some of the real issues in the world economy, where some guys argue, IMF for example, when 1997 East Asian crisis happened, when they lent to Indonesia, they were told very strictly, you have to do this, you have to cut Samurdhi, you have to cut Janasavya, you have to cut free education. But what happens is when you cut those things, these economies, rather than enhancing, began to contract. So it is good from them. What they say is, look here, we can't give you cash to pay for your free school. Okay? Now that's a very very banking attitude. If the bank gives you money, they tell you, look, you can't do this for this. They restrict you. But what happens is, you as an enterprise, you might want to do various things differently, and you're not given that free hand. So as a result, producers are fighting with the lenders. There's a serious issue within Greece, saying people, look, we don't want to accept this, but they have no choice. Why? Because their reserves have gone down so badly, nobody lends to them, and as a result, they had to be borrowing from institutions which are very, very restrictive. Okay. Yeah, you're going to say something.
As far as the Hambantota is concerned, have we done so far is most appropriately?
I think there are a number of ways to look at. Now, one is at the operational level, they say there are two investors. We have seemed to have chosen the investor who is of least favorable to us. So that's one side of it. The second side of it is that in the first place, this Hambantota port issue was wrought upon by us because of our own stupidity. We could have done it in a different way, and that would have saved Hambantota port, its national interest, and the country with a long-term objectivity. The argument about Hambantota port is, Hambantota port may look very average at this point of time, but it has a huge potential if you put the right kind of ingredients into action. So because of that, if you are surrendering your future because you have a problem in the current context, is a very inappropriate thing. So these are the arguments. The other side of the argument is, from the government, is, look, there is a huge debt and which is going to be defaulted if you don't So there's only way to get out of it is if you default, you become a pariah state. You become somebody, nobody lends you. It has happened to countries. When that happens, you become terribly, terribly down the precipice. So because of that, Hambantota Port, the government says, look, we have no way out. We want to stop this 1.2 billion payment. So the only way to do that is this kind of stuff. So there's no cash coming in. It's just that the liability is sought for ownership. Okay. So whether, as I mentioned to you, as far as this particular project is concerned, whether it is really the appropriate thing, it's tragic because you can't have another Hambantota Port. It is such a unique position, and there are other people who argue once the Hambantota Port gets going, you will have a cricket ground in Colombo Port because there is much of transfer of shipping. One does not know what is going to happen now. But I think one has to take into account all these possibilities. The problem this government has is when you have lost all the opportunities, you have very little choice. So it was it's a wrongdoing that is wrong upon you by your own stupidity, simple plain stupidity. When there are investors, you need to have cash coming in, otherwise the balance of payment cannot be balanced. You need to have a balance in the domestic economy. You need to keep the interest rates low. These are fundamental if you want to be exporting. And when you do the wrong one after the other, I'm not criticizing the government, but I feel very disappointed that things should have been put right with a little adjustment. When there are too much of politics getting in the way, you forget simple economics. In fact, I was telling a minister, look, you guys gave me 10,000 rupees. I didn't ask for it because then he said, look, there's an election. I said, if I was smart, you know what I would have done? I would have gone every Tom, Dick and Harry in this country, 100,000 rupees on an alphabetical order and finished the deal. So that would have made everybody happy. Everybody, Soma, Irene, Lata, Marian, everybody is given 100,000 rupees. So you look at your alphabetical order name, okay, I'm going to get my 100,000 rupees on such and such a date. Finished it off. Now what are we doing now? Every year, every month, you have to set aside 12 billion extra cash until these government servants die. Can you beat that? I said, plain stupid. I think this is where, when you don't run the economy right, you can destroy something which is beautiful and which is with a lot of opportunity. Yep, you're going to ask something. No, you're scratching your head. Okay. Anyway, any more questions, please? I think, let me also make a very quick remark about myself. I never did economics, but I found it's very fascinating. If you just look around, the questions, there are so many questions around us. Why people remain so poor? Why people are unable to deal with? Why is it that things are deteriorating? I teach at the university. Services are deteriorating. Everything is going down. Why it is happening? Where are the resources? Why are not mobilizing the resources? Why are we having so much of traffic? Have you put an economic value to this traffic? If you had put an economic value, someone will make note of it and correct it. Why? Because we run a chaotic system. We love to have a chaotic system. Why? The advantage of chaotic system is you can really have your own way of working things out. And as long as we get ourselves into some orderly thinking, prospective, objective thinking, and understand that everybody has to be in that bus, not just a handful of people, then I think we don't need so much of efforts. I was in Dakar last October and I was given a lift by a friend of mine. I asked, his car has buffers on either side, metal, the original thing, and there's a metal bar in front. I said, why? No, Machan, color light, you stop, somebody comes and, knock on you. And it is so common. It's that basic level. In India, people don't go to toilets, right? Because the literacy is so bad. People don't understand. And so government decides, okay, Modi has decided, okay, everybody is given a toilet. So what? People don't go to toilets. Now you have toilets, people are still on those Tanakal Pictanis. So then you have another army of people with bells and pushing people out of these lands to toilets. You don't have to do it in Singapore. You just tell them, look, this is the way to do that. You can see everybody for that's the education we have. We don't use that asset. I don't know how many of you remember, a few years ago there was this lane business when it was first introduced. I drive from Panadura. I had a peace of mind driving from Panadura to Colombo, although the traffic was slow, but I never had the worry that somebody is cutting into my lane. Why? Just 2 days we were able to put things right. Third day, all forgotten. This is this country. Good night.